Ohad or Giddy, if you can let me know when you see that Dr. Finkelstein has joined, and then we shall begin. Dr. Small, thank you so much for taking the time and being here. Okay, I see Dr. Finkelstein has joined. Dr. Finkelstein, I think we should begin, as people are definitely signed in. Give me one more minute, and then we will. Dr. Small, I believe you can unmute yourself, right?
Yeah, I just did.
Perfect. Okay. And Giddy, you can, yes, also unmute yourself.
Yep.
Okay. And same with Ohad. I don't yet see Malcolm Hoenlein. Ohad, I'm going to ask you to take care of that when he joins. Okay. You can always signal me. Okay. We are ready to begin. We still have lots of people joining, but it's just now 9:02, and we will start. So first of all, welcome everybody to what is an incredibly important symposium at this catastrophic time. We are very privileged tonight to be joined by Dr. Charles Small, who is the head of an organization called ISGAP. You will hear more about that later. Dr. Small and I have learned together and worked together for several years already on the subject of anti-Semitism, and of course, we've studied Torah together. We are also privileged to have joining us Dr. Finkelstein, who many of you have come to know through our online learning classes, and he and I have definitely been studying Torah together as well as working together over these last several years. We were actually first introduced through Dr. Small and his work on anti-Semitism. I'm told that we are being joined shortly by Malcolm Hoenlein, who is, I think, a childhood friend of my father's, and we are honored to have him join us as well. Obviously, the emotions are just incredibly raw, and we are all devastated beyond belief, and we are in the middle. This is nowhere near being over. We are both mourning and full of trepidation all at the same time, and this is an incredibly challenging time for us as a nation. One of the reasons that this idea occurred to me is because the truth is that in order for us to really be one nation, we have to talk together. We have to talk together from all different walks of life, and people that are on the front lines of many important Jewish activities need to converse with one another, need to get to know with one another, and we need to build trust with each other, because what we're dealing with is real. It's way too real, and it has been in the works for a long time, as Dr. Finkelstein and Dr. Small will share with you. A Torah perspective on this entire subject cannot properly be discussed without discussing Amalek. Amalek is the example in the Torah of the only obligation that we as a nation have a clear mandate to destroy. That is crystal clear at the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and this is a very challenging concept for many Jews and has been for a long time. And if we look at the sentences that describe what Amalek is and who they are, it's actually very terse. The Torah doesn't say much about them. There are 3 sentences, which, by the way, is the only biblically mandated Torah obligation to read in public, are those 3 sentences. All other Torah readings that we read every year are either rabbinic or our most famous prophet Moshe instituted them, but the only fully agreed upon biblical obligation to read the Torah in public are these 3 sentences. Remember what Amalek did to you on the road when you left Egypt. They attacked you coldly on the road. They attacked you from behind, those that were weak among you, and you were tired and weary. And Amalek did not fear God. And it will be that when God gives you rest in the land that he gives to you to inherit it, Eretz Yisrael, you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. Do not forget. And the reason that Amalek is the paragon example of our enemy is, as the Torah itself describes earlier in the book of Shemos, that this is a war between God and Amalek midor dor. From every generation to the next, this hatred exists, and this is a war against God. Make no mistake about it. All of the incredibly barbaric, subhuman, beyond belief atrocities that have occurred have basically been predicted by the Torah. And the question is, why does the Torah not tell us more than those 3 sentences that I just quoted for you? What is the message? And my suggestion is, the message is that Amalek had no reason to attack the Jewish people. They were not coming to harm them. Amalek was not even after the Jewish money that they had just taken out of Egypt. They simply hate the Jewish people, wanted to destroy the Jewish people, even though they knew they would not be successful. And that is hatred to its core. And unfortunately, with that type of hatred, you cannot negotiate, as we have learned since the inception of the State of Israel in 1948. There is no negotiating, and we have to remember and never forget. And lastly, I'll just leave you with this thought. A lot of people are describing these things as animalistic. The truth is, that's far too kind, and animals don't do this kind of activity. This is a perversion of humanity. And in fact, the rabbis tell us that one of the things that the Amalek people were able to do was to disguise themselves as animals so they couldn't be found so easily and be destroyed. And the behavior that we're seeing now is less than human. It is a perversion of a human being. And unfortunately, there is no reasoning, there is no listening, and they will not choose differently. That is a major foundation of the perspective of this type of hatred from the Torah. And with that, I would like to introduce our moderator, Gidi Führer, who is an alumnus of our yeshiva, and we are very privileged that Gidi has continued to work with us since he has graduated the yeshiva and is now an official mental health counselor. And he has worked hard on this program and many other things that we are doing. He is going to lead the moderating. He is going to introduce the panelists. We're going to have the panelists speak a little bit, and then we are going to take some questions from the moderator. Towards the end of many of the comments, we will then have a question answer session.
Thank you, Rabbi Zweig, Harav Akiva Zweig, for your words and your guidance in this time. I'm going to introduce our 3 panelists, hopefully 3 panelists. Then we're going to jump right in. First, I want to talk about Dr. Charles Asher Small, who is the founding director of the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, more commonly known as ISGAP, and a well-known face to many of us in the yeshiva community. He oversees the ISGAP Wolf Institute training program. He holds a PhD from St. Anthony's College, Oxford, and has taught at various prestigious institutions worldwide, and is a known expert in anti-Semitism studies, globalization, social movements, and racism. We're also joined by Dr. Joel Finkelstein, who has a PhD in psychology from Princeton, and is a co-founder and chief science officer of the Network Contagion Research Institute, which utilizes machine learning to understand and combat hate and extremism online, specifically in social media. and he directs the Network Contagion Research Lab at Rutgers University. His work is utilized by governments and features in major media outlets. For those of you who know, he recently spoke and testified on anti-Semitism, both at the EU and at the Knesset. Obviously, many of you, or if not all of you, know Harav Akiva Zweig, who is the Rosh Yeshiva and Dean of Students at the Talmudic University of Florida in Miami Beach. And he has spoken, besides for guiding many students and community members for many years, he has spoken about anti-Semitism and Jew hatred in all its forms, both in Miami and worldwide, at Oxford and other places, other institutions, and is committed to spreading the light of the Torah and Jewish ethics, emphasizing their real-world relevance across the various life paths and times in the life cycle. And finally, I don't know if he's in yet, but we have Malcolm Hoenlein.
He's currently trying to join and is having difficulty getting back in. He's saying it's
So Ohad is on top of that situation. We are maxed out at 100. Dr. Finkelstein or Dr. Small, we're locked out at 100. Do either of you have a Zoom link that has more than that?
I don't know. I have a pro account. I'm not sure what the max is on that. It probably is the same as yours, as a regular paid account. Dr. Small?
We have it, but I don't know how to use it.
Oh, I see Malcolm's here.
Is it okay?
Yeah, we were able to.
Somebody dropped off. Now we're back to 100.
Yeah, that's what we're able to do. If anyone is able to share, that would be helpful. There are other people that are trying to get in. Sorry, don't know what else to do.
Okay, well, yeah, it's a sad commentary on the time because people are in need of this guidance. So I'm glad that we have such a esteemed panel. Just finally about Malcolm Hoenlein, he holds a PhD from University of Pennsylvania. He is formerly the executive vice chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations and is the founding executive director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater New York. He's been quoted as the person who gets in to see all the prime ministers and popes. That's from many organizations and news clippings. He has extensive experience in Jewish community leadership and public policy. He has been recognized with numerous awards and affiliations, contributing his expertise throughout media appearances and advising public officials. So it's an absolute privilege to have these four thought leaders, joining us to give us some guidance. So I guess the first question I have for each of you, and we'll start with Dr. Small, is can you tell us a little bit about what the last couple of days have looked like for you, and what challenges you have faced? Just give us some sort of insight into how your life has looked for the last couple of days.
So thanks. So first of all, get on, and Ohad, thank you very much for organizing this. Akiva, thank you, and Joel and Malcolm. It's an honor to be with everybody. So I think the question, like everybody here on this call, it's been a very sobering, 5 days or so, from Friday night, Saturday morning till now. And it's serious. It's a serious moment. Rabbi Akiva started speaking about Amalek, and there's a profound truth in this. And Rabbi Akiva's perspective and insights into reality and life is often hits the nail on the head with his wisdom. And I think, in a way, perhaps, if I can speak about miracles in front of my Rebbe, perhaps this was a blessing. Perhaps this was a wake-up call. For the past year, for more than a year, but especially in the past year, the Jewish people have been divided in a way that was extraordinarily disturbing and foolish. Between secular Jews and religious Jews, between Mizrahi Jews and Ashkenazi Jews, between Jews in the diaspora, Jews on the right, Jews on the left, the recriminations have been horrific. And the blessing is, 5 days into this, the unity of all Jewish people, of all Israelis, and even the government of Israel today, and the diaspora Jews doing incredible things to support our brothers and sisters in Israel, is perhaps the blessing. And we should never, ever, ever, ever lose sight of how important it is to be a unified people. We know from our history, we know from the Torah, that when the Jewish people are united, there is absolutely nothing we cannot do. From the ashes of the Holocaust, from the refugees of Arab Muslim countries, in less than 2 generations, the Jewish people came together and created one of the most amazing nations on the planet. From high technology and medical research, in business, in innovation, in food, in culture, in music, the dynamic of Israel, when you go to see it and see all the people that have been in the land of Israel for many generations, people who have come from all over the world, and the magic and the chemistry and the creativity, the energy of the Jewish people is astounding. And if we are united, there is nothing we cannot do. The future will be bright, despite dealing with Amalek, dealing with an ideology, as Rabbi Akiva said, that is worse than animals, because animals do not behave like this to another species, let alone their own species. And I think this is the lesson, and this is perhaps the blessing, and we will come out of this stronger and better, and we should never, ever forget that we need each other. We need the innovators, the liberal intellectuals, the cosmopolitan Israeli people. And we need the yeshiva students, and we need the wisdom of our Torah. And together, nobody can negate this beautiful mosaic that is ancient and wise and dynamic. And this to me is the hope. And you know, God willing, that we'll never forget this, and we'll always be united despite our differences, and we have to respect each other and respect the differences among us. And this is our genius.
Thank you very much, Dr. Small. Next, we're going to go to Dr. Hoenlein, who I believe has just come back from the front. So hopefully you can give us real-time insight into what's been going on and how your last couple of days have been.
Oh, just give me a second. What name is Dr. Hoenlein under?
Okay, I got it.
Oh, you're okay.
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
The modern technology, the miracles. But I returned today and was 36 hours ago in Sderot and in Be'eri, and want to share some of the experience. I will not give a full description because I don't want to ruin everybody's sleep tonight, but I do want to awaken their consciences and to make people aware of what we really are facing. It is indeed, as Rabbi Zweig said, Amalek, and Machatimcha, we have to erase the memory of Amalek, but first you have to remember, you have to understand it, you have to know what the threat is in order to then to eradicate it. Uviarta harami kirbecha, that we're commanded to take the evil out of our societies and our midst, and we are facing the ultimate expressions of evil. The barbarism, the inhumanity, the insanity that I saw, the brutality, the senseless brutality of abusing bodies, of cutting the heads of children, of babies, of countless body bags, going door to door in the town of Be'eri, which has about 1,000 people, and the number of dead is far in excess of the 100, and many are still missing, and some are captive and held as hostages. They went door to door. They shot up the houses indiscriminately. They broke everything in the house. And when they couldn't get people out of the safe room, they set fire to the place. And when the children jumped out of the windows, they shot them. I saw trucks from the chewing gum company provided some of the refrigerated trucks they had because the army didn't have enough. And I saw 70 bodies in one, 50 in another, 40 in the third. And the heroism of the people who were down there to protect the sanctity of these bodies, some of which have been laying there, for almost 3 days, and the stench of death that permeated the air and every inch of the place where we walked. I could see the blood on the doorposts. I could see the attempts to escape and how they were brutally cut down by these barbaric individuals. They're not human beings. These are animals who are trained by and driven by an absolutely extremist ideology and theology that has no value of human life. Even the Nazis try to hide their crimes. These guys advertise them. They send videos. They show the world how brutal, how inhumane they are. And the imperative of the moment, I went to visit soldiers in Hadassah Hospital. And while I was there, and in fact, I knew the families of 3 of the 6 that I visited. One was from Montreal and 2 from the United States. They said to me, you have to go down and see what's really happening. And I demurred. I thought, I don't want to intrude. And the truth is that I was really reluctant to do it. And they said, no, you have to. Ein do Maria Shmiya, that you can't compare seeing it if you want to recount it. And they said, you have to see it to be able to tell people about it and show that you were a witness to what really happened and not just having read it in a newspaper. And I went down as I said, to Stay Road. All along the highway near there, cars were strewn all over the sides of the road because the Hezbollah guy, the Hamas guys, just drove down on scooters, on motorcycles, and shot the people through the cars, through windows. You see windshields riddled bullets, and the back seats riddled because they shot children. You could see the doors where they tried to escape, but to no avail. And then we came to Be'eri. First, it's right next to the staging ground for tanks and artillery. And the Achdut that Dr. Small made reference to, which is the one precondition that God set for every great miracle that happened to the Jewish people, from when we stood Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad, as one people with one heart at Mount Sinai, when we felt what was in each other's hearts, to the rescue of Russian Jews and Ethiopian Jews and Syrian Jews and Iranian Jews and Iraqi Jews, many of whom were written off to history. When Jews stood together, then the miracles happened. It's the one precondition God demands of us for those miracles. When Esther said, Lech kanosas kol Yehudim, go and gather all the Jews, when Haman, the descendant of Amalek, thought we were vulnerable because we were Amafuzar Mufarad, because we were a separated and divided nation. And that is the message that I think of this past year, that the Hezbollah and Hamas and Papij all took from the demonstrations, because they don't allow them and can't see it as part of a democracy, but saw it as a sign of weakness, of the divisiveness of the Jewish divisions in the Jewish people. And that when people said they wouldn't show up for the reserves, when I drove past 2 of the big army bases, actually 3, all along the highway for maybe a mile, you saw cars lined up on the sides, both sides of the roads, because it was guys who came to answer the call, just literally got in their cars and drove to their bases, often not even packing a suitcase because they didn't have time to show up at the base. And they have 120% of the recruitment showing up, meaning 20% more than the people that they had called up to the base. So those who say that Israelis are not going to respond to the call, or that they're demurred from the commitment to the state, that's the answer. And you saw Hasidim down at the front lines, all over the front lines, bringing food, taking care, as I said, of the bodies, but taking care of the needs of the soldiers, and the love, the mutual love and respect that one saw there, which I hoped will carry through, so that we have the Achdut, the fundamental commitment to one another, that is really so critical. Because this is not a war about territory. This is not a war of militants against Israel. This is a war against the Jewish nation, the Jewish people, the Jewish faith, the Jewish past, and the Jewish future. This is about our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. This is about whether the Jews have a future to look forward to, and what our grandchildren will inherit from us. And it's essential that we understand, if people could cut pregnant women and behead little babies. And I don't want to talk about everything, but such brutality, it's not even conceivable. I think for a lot of people, it would be hard to believe that this really could happen in this day and age. And the way that they carried it out, and the inhumanity of it, not valuing human life. So this is a war not just against Israel; it's a war against America. It's a war against the Western values, against democracy, and it's what we stand for. As long as the Jews exist, the values, the principles that we have carried through all of the ages and shared with the nations of the world remain a threat to the Moleks of our time, Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There, it is important for us to get the message out. The media already has started to distort, talking about the deaths on both sides. There aren't deaths on both sides. Criticizing the fact that people in Gaza don't have shelters. They don't have shelters because their government took all the cement and used it to build tunnels and spend hundreds of millions of dollars on these elaborate terror tunnels rather than on the needs of the people. They don't have an electricity plant because the money was spent on other things. They don't have water treatment, even though it was offered, because it was spent on other things. Their leadership lives in Qatar and luxuriates in the hotels there while the people suffer, not because of Israel, but because of their own leadership. And so I met with one ambassador yesterday. I had a call with him, actually, and from a country that has not been supportive. And I said to him, the next time the PKK attacks your country, we'll remind you about even-handedness. We'll remind you that you should de-escalate. We'll remind you of the plight of the people on the other side, rather than facing up for the security of your people and defending the legitimate causes that we represent. The world has got to be reminded constantly, and it's up to each of us to find a way to do it, to contribute to this, to be part of not only the Achdus, but to be part of the army that will help spread that unity, that will give the message, tell what these heroic young soldiers, I mean, many of them, look like they're 18, 19, and they are, and older men, 50s, 40s, coming out and wanting to be part of it, waiting to do what their responsibility is. And to say simply to have a two-state solution as that would be some sort of a magic wand. We gave them a state. We gave them Gaza. And what did we get in return? We got a kingdom of terror. So I hope that everybody will help spread the truth, give the real message. 10 negotiations in the last century, 10 times the Jews said yes, 10 times the Arabs said no. Now it's time for us to make sure that we get the truth out, that we tell the story, and remember that those karbanos, those who died, should not be in vain if we can show and assure the security of the state of Israel and the Jewish people.
Thank you. Thank you so
for
much,
those
Hoenlein.
unbelievably powerful words and message. I'm a little bit speechless, which is not a usual situation. Can we move on, I guess, to Dr. Finkelstein? Tell us a little bit about your... Okay, I guess Dr. Finkelstein wants the rabbi to speak. Can Rabbi, maybe can you tell us a little about the last couple of days, maybe some questions and concern you've heard and how you're thinking about as a people using the wisdom of the Torah? How can we digest the horrific information that we're seeing? How can we digest it, and how can we start to move forward to grow together in Achdus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So many of us are just trying to grapple with so many different thoughts. Anxiety is a major issue for many people, especially those that are living in Eretz Yisrael. They're dealing with questions of, can they leave? Are they allowed to leave if they can? We have the incredible service of so many people that are leaving from Chutz La'aretz to go to Eretz Yisrael. I think one of the major points is that we all that are not on the front lines feel guilty and are wondering, are we doing anything? Are we doing enough? What should we be doing? And I think we have to pay very close attention to reprioritizing our lives even more severely than when we did at the beginning of this past Elul. And this is real. This is, everybody talks about Mashiach. These are the pangs of the Mashiach, and we have to get real. And I think one of the major things is like the symposium that we're doing tonight. People really have to turn out and talk to each other. We have to listen to experts and thought leaders that we can trust and respect. And we have to bring more people in to the good work that they can do. We have to collaborate. Achdus is not the idea of not fighting with one another. It's about synergizing and becoming harmonious. The true definition of shalom is not peace. My father always teaches it comes from the word shalem, which means completion. That can only happen if we're really, truly working together. One of the things that I feel so blessed about is that we were able to put this together in a matter of 24 hours, this concept, what we're doing tonight, because of the work of Dr. Small, because of the work of Dr. Finkelstein, because of the work of our yeshiva, and how we really are trying to reach out to the extended Jewish world and to become activated and to activate all Jews to the important work. Jews are unbelievable people. Dr. Small hit the nail on the head. And what I would encourage most people to think about at this time is what's my particular role, what's my critical contribution that I can make to our people and ultimately to the world. Jews have unbelievable capacity. It occurred to me tonight, the Jewish people were tribes before they left Egypt, but they only formed an army and flags and divisions after they received the Torah. It has to be through the Torah that everybody finds their proper role and contribution. So everybody has to study more. Everybody has to ask, what does the Torah say to do in their lives? And everybody has to get off the sidelines and into the fray.
Thank you, Rabbi. We go to Dr. Finkelstein. Dr. Finkelstein, can you tell me a little about what the last, I'm sure, very hectic couple of days it looked like for you, and some of the challenges, some of the realities you're seeing? I think, in specifically for me, if you could focus on, I know you're one of the world's leaders in understanding social media and specifically anti-Semitism in social media. And can you talk a little about that as well as the last couple of days have looked like?
Well, I definitely will. But I want to start really by backing up and trying to contextualize what's happening and why it's happening. I think that the world is going through some pretty massive changes, and it's created a lot of uncertainty for many people. The waves of immigration that are saturating Europe are and the major nationalistic projects and concerns about genocidal violence. These are the themes that were devastating to the world, 60, 70 years ago in World War II. And what ended up happening, I think, in many ways, was that we needed to figure out ways in which nations could be thought of as being both ethnic and somehow committed to democracy, and how perhaps we could create protections for people who'd suffered genocide, who were helpless in the nations of stronger people. How could we create protections that could protect vulnerable minorities and communities in other people's countries? In both cases, we chose the Jew as the model. We decided after the Holocaust that we needed a set of protections for all people everywhere. Those were decided in Nuremberg, and the prosecution that brought about the rules and regulations in the international criminal courts, and decisions about how our commitments to protect people wherever they are in the form of international human rights. And those commitments were based on the death of Jewish people primarily. This idea of needing a nation state that could be ethnic and somehow committed to democracy, like the Jewish one, that could prove that not all of them were quite as bad as these German ethnic nationalist movements. People are beginning to question the world order. They're beginning to question its legitimacy. When they talk about ethnic nations that are tyrannical, their example now is Israel. When they talk about populations that deserve to be destroyed because they're bringing in immigrants and displacing ethnic nations, their examples are the Jews. This is a war, but it isn't a war with two sides. It's a war against one people who represent both a national and international human rights movement. The evidence of that is not only in what's happening now in Israel, the evidence is in what happened before. So I'm going to share my screen here for a minute, if I may. Let me see if I can do that. And I'm going to show you some data. Is that all right? Is it okay that I do
Yes,
that?
yes.
Yes, please.
Okay. This is what happened in May of 2021 when this happened last time. And what we've learned since then, and work that has been created by the Network Contagion Research Institute, it's the largest scale data analysis on the subject of how wars in Israel can rapidly transform into global wars of civilizations against Jews. This was work that was premiered in Forbes and Newsweek, and that was provided to members of the Interparliamentary Task Force on Anti-Semitism in the European Parliament, as well as the Knesset. And what we wanted to understand was when wars against Jews do take place, there's a system that evolves from missiles that are then transformed into online memes with state actors generating those, and trolls and hateful groups, which then turn into mobilizations on the ground. What I'm showing you here in the dotted lines in May of 2001 were the attacks back and forth, dotted red and blue, between Israel and Hamas. The solid lines are anti-Semitic attacks, those that took place on college campus and those that took place in on the county level. And in green, you're looking at mobilizations and protests. One of the things to notice is that the protests, the mobilizations, and the attacks, they extend far beyond the beginning and ending of hostilities that occurred in Israel itself. All over North America, an ecosystem of protests, political marches, and attacks against Jews, a low-grade pogrom began to take shape. And it extended long after the hostilities had ceased in Israel. Now, the thing to notice about this signal is that it's highly correlated with social media activity, where people were using these terms like apartheid, ethnic cleansing, settler, and colonialist. That distribution on Twitter was a perfect match for when and how these attacks against Jews all over the world were taking place. The social media signal was transforming the local war in Israel into a popular war globally against Jews. Where those tweets would emerge, where words like apartheid or settler were being used in America, that predicted where attacks would take place, both on campuses and on the county level. Our geospatial models showed that this was true, but what's more, we found that when terms like settler, colonial, Zionist, apartheid, when these terms appeared on social media, that's this signal here, this big spike in the middle is May. Below it, that's not the same graph. Those are anti-Semitic incidents in the real world. And so they're synced up in time as well. Okay, this doesn't seem to be about social justice, guys. So when we're looking at this signal now, what we can see, sorry, let me see if I can get rid of this stuff, is that this time the signal appears much bigger. Already, we've seen Khalid Mashal, the leader of Hamas, calling for a global day of rage against Jews and threatening to storm the border in Gaza. He's calling for protests all over the world this Friday. We've circulated memorandums to the FBI, the Joint Terrorist Task Force, the Department of Homeland Security, the ADL, and the Secure Community Network, that this day of rage is trying to instigate an ecosystem of protests and mobilizations following exactly from what we saw in May of 2021. And so we can see a globalization of this hostility taking shape. This isn't about a nation. It's fundamentally about what a nation and a people represent. There's good news in this. I know that sounds crazy to say. How could there possibly be good news in this? The good news is that we can see this. We can see these signals. And the problems that are coming for Jews are not fundamentally about Jewish life. They're about the values that support a life of value. They're about the values that support what does support life in an ongoing way. The problems we face, I guarantee you, there are problems that everybody is going to face. And the question about how to manage them, when they blame Jews, when they say that Jews are replacing us, when ethnic nations are worried that Jews are replacing them, or when they're worried that Jews are an ethnic nation replacing other people, they're really reporting on a failure of their own imagination and a world order that's getting too chaotic for them to control, and the need for somebody else to blame. As we solve these problems through our connection to each other, through the brilliance of the Jewish people, we have an opportunity to showcase what it means to unify against these kinds of threats. The whole world needs to know how to do that, because none of them seem to believe it's possible. I believe we will have an opportunity to show them that it is possible. I work with Malcolm on a regular basis, and Charles, I'm honored to say. And there's a new system that we're introducing to monitor these threats at scale, to perceive them in the university, where we have willfully ignored them for far too long. We're developing systems to see these things and to create better ways to fight them, and to do that together. The whole world will need that, not just us. But we could be a great example of how that works.
Thank you so much, Dr. Finkelstein, for that deeply insightful presentation from your NCRI lab. On the topic of college campuses, I would like to go to Dr. Small. Dr. Small, I think for any of us that have been around college campuses for the last 10 years, are unfortunately not surprised by the hate and Jew hatred that has come out of the college campuses. Much of your work focuses on education and educating the educators about anti-Semitism, Jew hatred. Can you talk to us a little bit about the unsurprising nature, or if it is unsurprising, and a little bit about how we can work towards improving college campuses for young people and for the Jewish people?
Okay, how long would you like me to speak for? Like, I was told 3 minutes, or
12 hours.
that's the short version. So for how long should I respond for?
As long as
Take at least
a few minutes, but
take 5 minutes.
I would,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So it's an important question. So first of all, I want to say, and I think, those of us from Jewish institutions on the call, I think what Dr. Finkelstein said was very important, that you should check with, I don't want to sound alarmist, but there are calls for Friday the 13th to be a jihadist day of action against the Jewish community all over the world. And I think those of us should, we shouldn't be paranoid, and we should carry on with our lives as best we can. But I think institutions, yeshivas, synagogues, community centers, you should really kind of be aware and check in with your local authorities, because the global situation is getting hot for Jews, and every time there's a spike, violence in the Middle East regarding Israel, we know there's a spike in anti-Semitism in Europe, North America, South America. So we need to be vigilant and aware, and I think that's very important. In terms of the atmosphere on campus, I'll say two things. I think going back to Malcolm's words, which were so powerful and disturbing, is that the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, of political Islam, demonizes Jewish people to be subhuman. That's the ideology. And the core ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood, and its different branches, from Hamas to Hezbollah to the Iranian Revolutionary Regime to the Wahhabis to Daesh to ISIS, they see the Jew as the incarnation of evil, and it's a mitzvah, and this twisted ideology, to kill Jews, to destroy Israel, and to kill Jews. Immanuel Levinas, a great Jewish thinker who brought ethics, Torah, Pirkei Avot to the university, always says from a Jewish perspective, and this is not Christian tolerance, which is problematic in all sorts of ways, because to be tolerant of the other is a form of paternalism. So in Jewish wisdom, in Jewish ethics, Immanuel Levinas says that the moment we see our face in the face of the other, the moment we see our face in the face of the other, that's the instant we become human. So Jewish ethics, we need the other to be human. This is how we are raised. This is second nature, sometimes unconsciously to us. And this is why the Jewish people have been at the forefront of the civil rights movement and Soviet Jewry and Ethiopian Jewry and anti-apartheid, if Elie Wiesel fighting Cambodia, fighting for Rwanda. It's because we need the other to be human. This is our culture. This is our wisdom. And we're facing an enemy that is out to destroy the other. And as Elie Wiesel always taught us, anti-Semitism begins with the Jews, but it doesn't end with the Jews. That once this form of hatred is unleashed, it knows no boundaries. And we can see that this ideology of genocidal anti-Semites also subjugate women, kill gay people. They don't recognize minorities or moderate Muslims, the vast majority of moderate Muslims. Iranians living under the regime, Palestinians in Gaza living under the tyranny of Hamas. They don't accept the other. Now, in a way, as you know, as Malcolm said, these barbarians are advertising their slaughters. And by doing this, they're attracting other jihadists to the struggle. Sick. But at some level, if we study the ideology, it kind of makes sense. We have to fight and smash the ideology. There's no negotiation, as Rabbi Akiva said, from a Torah perspective and from a moral, ethical perspective. If the enemy does not see us or any other group of people as fully human, you cannot compromise, you cannot negotiate. It's stupidity and suicide. But what makes me so disgusted, it's the liberal, pseudo-liberal intellectuals at our finest universities, at the Ivy Leagues, at NYU, at Columbia, at Harvard and Yale, at Sorbonne, at Oxford and Cambridge, the list goes on, where liberal intellectuals have been dehumanizing Jewish people, have been dehumanizing Zionism and Israel. And they do it because the Qataris and the Saudis, with their billions of dollars, have been investing money into our education system for decades. And the presidents of our best universities, which many in the United States are so proud of their alumni, of where they graduated from, they willfully take money from people who are out to exterminate Jews and to destroy democracy and subjugate women. And it's a shanda, it's a scandal. And at ISGAP, we've been, I'm speaking now emotionally, but as a scientist, we've documented this, of tens, hundreds of billions of dollars going into your best universities in the United States of America and Canada and Europe. Yosef Kawadawi, the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, who argued his entire life that the true believer is obligated to finish the work of Hitler. He started Islamic studies at Oxford University that I'm so proud that I graduated from. And it permeates our universities.
Yeah.
And it's these liberal intellectuals who will appear on the BBC, who will be on CNN, who will be on WNBC and PBS and NPR in 48 hours, maybe in 72 hours, and they will start their hate. And they legitimize what happened in southern Israel. your children's professors, your grandchildren's professors. In the United States, you're paying $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year to send your children to learn that Jews are bad. And imagine in our best universities, right? We know from our history that Jews were exterminated less than 2 generations ago because we were poisoning the purity of the white Aryan race. That was taught by the best German and European universities, the philosophers, the theologians, the social scientists, the policy professors. This is what was taught, that the Jews were poisoning the purity of the white Aryan race and they had to be eliminated. And this culminates in the Holocaust. Less than 2 generations, ladies and gentlemen, we were now being defined by these clowns at the best universities as being white. And it's not welcome to the club, sorry for what happened. Oh no, we are white, we are the quintessential racists, we are colonizers, we are usurpers, we are occupiers in the apartheid regime of the Zionist entity. And this is what professors are teaching in the classrooms. And then you have the Students for Justice in Palestine. And in our research, we connect them to the Muslim Student Association, which is a direct connection to the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar funds the Muslim Brotherhood. They fund the Students for Justice on campuses at our best universities. They are the shock troops for the Muslim Brotherhood. They are the shock troops for Hamas. The level of the intellectual discourse when it comes to Jews and Zionism in Israel is so permeated, so disgusting, that this is what's passing at universities. This is what's tolerated. And the Students for Justice in Palestine, the offshoot for the Muslim Brotherhood, the offshoot of Hamas, the offshoot of Iran, are now calling for Friday to be a day of rage at our universities, in which you are paying your children's tuition to go. So it's here. We are being debased and dehumanized. Your kids on campus are public enemy number 1 because they support the apartheid Zionist regime by going to Hillel, by going to Chabad houses.
Yeah.
They're in this sort of liberal postmodern space. They represent the enemy. At CUNY a few months ago, some professors who were discriminated because of anti-Semitism filed a complaint at the university, and they became the target of the investigation because the white apartheid supporters were causing trouble for the equity office by claiming there's anti-Semitism on campus. They're undermining the intercultural social justice environment by claiming there's anti-Semitism. This is how far and how disgusting it's getting in this country. So going back to Rabbi Akiva, it's all hands on deck. There's no escape. This is not the problem just for our Zionist Israeli brothers and sisters. It's happening here. And if the Muslim Brotherhood can fund our universities and shift the discourse as they have right under our noses so successfully, then what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, when students at our good universities learn to be good citizens and they learn that Israel, the apartheid entity, has to be reformed, or if Israel is an apartheid entity, from a liberal human rights perspective, we're morally obligated to dismantle it. So it's here, in the most powerful country in the world, in the United States of America. It's here. And and thank God, it seems that President Biden, I have to say, stood up. He had a wonderful speech yesterday. Maybe there's a turning point, but it's gotten so out of hand. CARE, which represents the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States of America, was named by the White House as part of the platform to fight anti-Semitism in the United States. ISGAP couldn't be invited. I don't think NCRI could be invited, but CARE was invited by the White House. Okay, but I hope that American interests are now at stake. I hope there's a turning point. But the situation, ladies and gentlemen, has been permeating even here in the United States of America.
Thank you so much for that insight into the workings of universities. I think we'll do one more question to Dr. Finkelstein for 5 minutes, and then we'll open the floor. I believe we can raise our hands. There's a way to do that here. Reactions, raise your hand, and Ohad will allow you to speak, to ask questions to one of the three panelists, and then we'll have closing remarks. Dr. Finkelstein, I want to just sort of use as a jumping off point something that Dr. Small just said, which is maybe soon things are changing. And as you pointed out, social media, the way people are reacting to social media is really the forerunner of what happens in the real world as regards to protests and violence. And it seems to me, maybe it's my optimism, that this time around things feel a little bit different, where there are people like President Biden or like big companies that otherwise may not have come out in support of Jews and Jewish life that are doing that. Is that something that I'm just hoping for, or is that something that you are seeing? And then if you can all do this in 5 minutes, I don't know, but what are some ways that we can, as users of social media, is there any way we can contribute to making social media a better environment for less Jew hatred? Let's put it that way. I don't know if we can go so far as say no Jew hatred, but less Jew hatred.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you're saying there. So I'll start with the second part first. What do we do about online anti-Semitism? And it's really the question of what we do about a pretty gruesome, trap. We find ourselves in a situation where the platforms can't control the people that are on them. The people that are on the platforms can't control themselves. The governments can't control the platforms, right? And for the most part, nobody's home. That's not unusual, this nobody's home business. That's what's happening in our universities too. That's what's happening with our lawmakers. That's what's happening everywhere. And we haven't been watching our border very carefully. We haven't been paying attention. We're deliberately not paying attention to how much Iranian money is actually coming to our members of Congress or our universities, like here in Princeton, that we haven't really, no one's really home, right? And so I think that there's a problem with the discourse that we have, and it's very difficult to manage that situation because people keep wondering who's responsible for stopping me, who's responsible for controlling my speech. Is it the platform's job? Is it the government's job? Is it so Jews have a specific philosophy on this. It's our job. It's our job to speak together and to control ourselves. That's our job, right? We have a certain philosophy of what that means to us. I think that's why we're under attack. We need new models of how we communicate online. We need new models of how we govern. Whenever the fault lines of government, whenever the fault lines of failures occur, and as societies evolve, the transformations always play out across Jewish life, just like they did in World War II. They always play out this way, where our industries, our intellectual efforts, they get ahead of our ability to control ourselves. So, the question of what replaces these models is anybody's guess. But I think that when it comes to Jewish life, what's becoming clear to me is that we have what we have in common, what we are going to have in common moving forward, is a common need to be in touch with reality ourselves, to have a deeper sense with one another about what are the reality we're facing. We need to know that. We need to know that as an issue of survival. The memes aren't going to cut it here, right? It's not going to work for us. And the basis of our communications need to increasingly be focused on the realities of Jewish security and how, and that's something we all need to be in line with. The ideas that they have, the way that they're venting their aggression, especially if it comes online, it interacts with what's happening in the universities. We see that, for instance, in the decolonization narrative. The work we've done with ISCAP, the work with Charles, and I'll just say a little bit about it here without giving away too much. This is like one of some preliminary results of one of 7 studies. It shows that where this money comes, where money comes, illegal money comes to universities, those universities become far more anti-Semitic, rowdy, and see more anti-Semitic incidents in response to social media signals that express outrage against Israel. It's like they become tuned to these populist tropes, and students become selectively more vulnerable there. Students become more profoundly activated. So there's an interaction between these things. And the bad ideas that people have about one another, whether they're racists or they're anti-racists, they can't even tell. I mean, we're white supremacists who are trying to displace people of color in their home country. No, we're people of color who are trying to bring in other immigrants to replace white people. I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty keeping track of who it is I'm supposed to be to you, right? It's becoming impossible to keep track because the basis of the identity is so incoherent. So what we have is a coherent identity. There's one great example in history where white people went to vast lengths to save black people, and it's because they were Jewish and Ethiopian and under great attack. Because those identity constructs aren't going to work for us. Their stupid ideas about who they are aren't going to work for us. So I'm honored to work with you, Charles, and you, Malcolm, and Rabbi. I'm honored to study with you. And I think that, you know, it's good. It's really great to have this fellowship and to hear, you know, to start thinking through impossible problems and push against them to put out new ideas and try to tell the truth.
If I may jump in just in between Joel and my rabbi, and it's going back to what I think we've all said in different ways, is that we are being defined by the other. The non-Jews are defining us. And we have to go back into our wisdom. We have amazingly beautiful, wise ideas that define who we are as a people. We have to know who we are. We have to know who we are as Jews. And once we know who we are, we can be strong. If we're always being defined as white, as not white, as black, as usurpers of black, usurpers of white, communist, capitalist, we really have to know our wisdom and who we are as a people. And this is why we need the rabbis, we need the wise scholars, we're an amazing community, people. We have so many talents, so many perspectives. There's nothing that can stop us if we know who we are.
That's so beautifully evidenced tonight. So I think we're going to do a couple of questions. We don't want to keep any of the panelists here too long because, as you've probably gleaned a little bit, they're quite literally out there saving the world. So if anyone wants to raise their hand or type in chat, we'd like to take a couple questions. Ohad, can you unmute Joseph? He's up there with his hand raised. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm Joe Oliver. I'm calling from Toronto. In spite of the groups that we've been discussing and the hatred that they're spewing, there's been a lot of support for Israel, and the horrors and the atrocities are, of course, helping garner that support. The concern is that when the Israeli army moves in to Gaza, civilian casualties will increase, and we'll start to hear, and we already are starting to hear, about disproportionality. And the whole dialogue can shift because there's a lot of people whose sympathy is very transitory. Now, I mean, the relevant question, of course, is there any other country stronger than its neighbor who massacred its citizens that would be constrained by the proportionality of its response, short of eliminating the threat and having it reoccur? That's the intellectual argument. But this is not primarily an intellectual debate. And so I wonder what the panelists think is the best response to that, because I fear it's coming.
If that can go for any, I guess, any one of the three panelists. If any of you are particularly interested in taking that question.
Rabbi,
Otherwise, I was going to say, otherwise we could pass it to the rabbi. It sounds like a question for
Sure.
a rabbi if I ever heard one.
I can answer, but maybe Akiva's been.
Okay, so it's just insane to think that proportionality is at stake. In guerrilla warfare, which this definitely is, a huge part of the task is to be able to find the enemy. And we have a principle in the Talmud that, somebody who comes to kill you, you have an obligation to wake up earlier and kill them. That's the Talmudic principle. And, everybody wants to hide behind various shields. But when I say everybody, I mean people who want to argue against an Israeli response, a Jewish response, will try to use that argument. But it doesn't hold any water. It's just illogical to say that I can't respond to protect myself when I need to respond. And if somebody would like to present all the people that are responsible for these atrocities and give them over to us, yes, then we'll be limited to them.
Just
Very briefly, if I may, I also think, especially those of us who occupy or work in liberal spaces like universities, we're always questioned. Israel's question, our allegiance to Israel's question. We have to be good Jews. And I think many of us know that space and that environment, and we've been sort of apologizing for our existence for a generation or two. And I think it's time to stop. This is the civilization, the societies that we live in have a very strong history of anti-Semitism being deeply rooted in the values of our society. We're being defined in ugly ways. We're being judged in certain ways. And I think at some point, we have to stop apologizing. We have to be proud of who we are, live by the ethics in the Torah, fight wars ethically, but fight, and stop apologizing. We should be very proud of who we are. We don't have to apologize to the children and grandchildren of perpetrators.
Yeah.
Of our perpetrators.
So yeah, when, this is really, the Torah is more the rabbi's domain, but when Yaakov is fighting the Malach of Esav, the Torah uses very interesting language. It says that the Malach, the angel, could not overcome him. Right? So what they're doing is completely predictable. There's nothing surprising about the fact that they're doing this. They've shown us exactly who they are. It's not surprising. And this is not the first time they've shown us that. Right? So what we must do is become fierce and competent and make it clear to them that we are going to be their problem, I'm afraid. That if their decision is that Jews no longer have the right to exist, then that's exactly why that decision is not going to belong to them. We have good reason to feel that way. And it's more than just it's just more than mere survival versus theirs. It's what it is we're surviving for.
Perfect. Thank you so much for those answers. I think we'll do one more question. Michael, if you can unmute, a 2-minute question, and then we'll give the panelists a quick opportunity to wrap up. Then I think Rabbi Akiva would like to say some closing words, and then we will all go and pray.
Thank you. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. With the ground incursion into Gaza very imminent, I am very concerned, and I think this is mainly a question for Malcolm Hoenlein, since he's was recently or still is in Israel. I'm very concerned. Hamas and Iran have had months, if not a year, to plan for this invasion, because the nature of their attack was to provoke an invasion. I'm very concerned that the IDF, so badly fooled in the initial attack, has not given adequate consideration that its troops are going to encounter in Gaza death traps, orders of magnitude more deadly and more sophisticated than they've ever encountered before. Dr. Hoenlein, do you have any sense from your time in Israel that the IDF General Staff is thinking in these terms?
I believe Dr. Hoenlein had to step off because, as you can imagine, he's probably both very busy and very tired from traveling around the world. So
Yes.
if any of the other three would like to take it, I'm sure they're more than able to answer this question.
I can as an amateur. In ISGAP, our vice president for strategic affairs is Brigadier General Seema Vaknin-Gill, who's a genius, and she's been giving us briefings as much as she can, to outsiders, I suppose. And I'm sure that the IDF is planning methodically. They know their enemy very well, and I don't think they'll be reacting emotionally. And it's obviously a serious task. The northern border is also heating up, but I think the Americans have warned Hezbollah and Iran to stand down. And I think that I think the government is unified now. They have very good people in the government. The IDF is one of the best armies in the world, and I believe that they are making the calculations appropriately.
Thank you. I believe Dr. Finkelstein mentioned that Malcolm is back.
He needs to be unmuted. I think Ohad might have muted him.
Yeah, he's unmuted. So if he,
Okay.
Dr. Hoenlein, perfect.
Thank you. I was there, or at least most of me is still here, but I left a little bit on the plane and a little bit at the airport and a little bit somewhere else, and having done 3 other events since I got back. But I think it's a very important question: is are we prepared for the next phase of what is inevitably going to come? That the love affair that we hear from some, when you see the Italian, German, British, French leaders getting together with the United States to support Israel, it's very exciting and reassuring, but it's not lasting. So we are already working now to assure that Israel's case is made, and that was part of the argument that we made, that first we have to build the consensus in our community if we're going to face the outside community. When Yaakov Avinu blessed his sons, he said, "Hey asvu v'hikabtzu." Hey asvu means gathering together, but it's not enough for us to be physically together like on this call or in other things. It's v'hikabtzu. It's to become like kibbutz, to become dependent upon one another and working with each other. So I think the first phase of this is the internal phase of developing the arguments, getting the messages, the work that Joel and others are doing, that we be able to have the ammunition and the means to communicate, which is the internet today. Unfortunately, it took Hitler months to spread a big lie. Today it's done in nanoseconds. And we have to be able to use the modern technology, the ability to communicate messages that will resonate with the people, the larger audiences. Unfortunately, we cannot rely on the media to get our story across. They unfortunately distort, misrepresent, and most come from the ideological perspectives which Israel's model does not easily adhere. So we have to make up for it. And that means utilizing all the resources that we have to tell the truth. Israel's strongest weapon has always been the truth. We're not asking people to whitewash it. Its record of morality, its military, is the principle of the sanctity of the weapons and the way that they conduct themselves, if given a true perspective. So we have to have the infrastructure first to build the support within our community, to reach out to build coalitions with others, many others who are ready to join with us, I think, today. And it's not just evangelicals, it's people from different communities, Hispanic communities, others that have demonstrated support in the last week. We have to sustain that. We have to work with our elected officials. We have to help get to the influencers who have tens of millions of followers and get the message out. We have to assure that it's a coherent message, one that people can accept, not exaggerate, not differentiate from, and be able to clearly differentiate our arguments from the opposition, which lies and distorts and misrepresents, because credibility is critical here. And we are all concerned about the next phase of, as the questioner pointed out, absolutely right. This will dissipate, and we are already working to try to elongate the period of the honeymoon, but anticipating that the showdown will come once Israel has to really respond forcefully in the territory. And it's something the Israeli government is very conscious of. We've had discussions with them about it, but it will take all of us in order to help assure that we build in the shock absorbers now for the inevitable showdown that will come.
Yeah. And just to add to that, Malcolm, I think what that means is that when Israel commits to going into Gaza, whatever happens next, they're in it for the long run. That's it.
They have no choice.
They have no choice.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, neither do we. So we have to be prepared to be in it for the long run too. Whatever hatreds come towards us for existing, they're unmerited, and our determination must outlast theirs. Our determination for unity and our stubbornness must outlast theirs, because it's far better justified.
I agree.
Thank you so much. So just to end, maybe a short 2 or 3 minute closing statement, specifically because in this yeshiva we like to be, number one, optimistic, but also very practically focused. So maybe if you can give 1 or 2 practical ideas that we each can take to support not only Israel, but also the great work that each of you are doing. So if we could start with Dr. Hoenlein, so you can go and hopefully get some rest and find that piece you left on the plane or in Israel.
First of all, I think everybody should remember the role of tefillah, of praying and beseeching God to be, that's our strongest ally, and throughout the ages, ultimately what will determine whether we win or lose. I think it's imperative that we draw together and reinforce one another's messages, and that we build the achdut, the unity that we see now, be manifest in everything that we do, that we hold to account those who differentiate, those who divide, those who seek to weaken the Jewish community, regardless of where they come from, inside or outside. We often are undermined, as we know, that sometimes the enemy comes from within, and the community has to be prepared to take stands and to set standards. And that is true when we reach out to the external world and to the internal world.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hoenlein, and we'll let you go. Thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate your frontline and your years of expertise and dedication to our community.
Thank you.
If we can go next to Dr. Finkelstein, just 3 minutes closing and just something actionable that you think we can implement.
Well, I would follow up on what Malcolm said only by saying, why is it that Tehillim, why is it that tefillah is so powerful? And the thing is, like, Hashem says, there are no people like my people. And what's amazing about the Jewish people is the whole, like, what is the whole big Jewish conspiracy people are so worried about? What are they so worried about? What does it look like? There's this temple, and boy, would we like to make sacrifices there on time one day. That's it. That's the whole big Jewish conspiracy, right? And then that's really what people can't believe. What they can't believe is that there's a people who have a vision for the world that they'll work together to achieve, that is self-contained, and that fundamentally opens us up to a relationship of trust and mutual cooperation and collaboration. All this high stakes game for what? For a world where we can be left to flourish unmolested. That should be a vision of the world everybody else wants. So the solution for this isn't me, it isn't Charles, it isn't Malcolm, it isn't the rabbi, although his Torah is great. It's the Jewish people. It's activating the Jewish people. When you are the solution to this, when we become active and work together and we unleash our talents together and we work in trusted ways, that's what they can't do. That's what baffles their mind. And when they see anyone else doing it, their assumption is, well, that's because you want to eat me. No, that's what you want to do. We're not like you. there are no people like my people.
Thank you so much, Dr. Finkelstein. On the note of tefillah, I'm sharing in the chat a Google document that I've been curating with the names of Chayalim, soldiers, as well as those who've been captured or are missing. I'm the only one who can edit it for obviously unfortunate and obvious reasons. So please feel free to reach out to me. My number is on the page if you have the name of a soldier or someone who's, God forbid, missing or captured, and we can all pray for that. Dr. Small, if you can give us three-minute closing, as well as anything that you think we could take concretely to do in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think I want to just echo what Joel and Rabbi Akiva and Malcolm have said. We have to stand unified. We have to respect each other. We have to respect our differences. Ellen Master has the answer. If you look at her screen, she's got this Israeli flag there, Magen David. To be proud, stop apologizing. The people on this call have there's so many talented people, professionals, doctors, lawyers, business people, scholars, intellectuals, scientists, rabbinical students and scholars. The list goes on. It's all hands on deck. Everybody take some time, take some resources, and fight the fight. We all have to contribute. We're one people, and we have to be strong. And yeah, be strong and reach out to people in our community. People are, distressed. People are not sleeping. Be helpful, be kind, and be strong. And I actually think that the pieces to the puzzle are going to be okay. I think General Gantz said it today. This is a time of war. We're in a serious war. It's a war. But after the time of war, there'll be a time, we hope, of peace. And I think the alignment in the region is shifting. There is, I'll just say very briefly, I was one of the first Israelis to meet with people in Saudi Arabia about 8 years ago. And a few months ago, I've made several trips there recently, and a few months ago, I was invited to Medina. Medina was off limits for non-Muslims. And I was invited by Medina, and I was given a tour by the government of Medina, and they took me on a Jewish tour of Medina, and they showed me the whole history of Jewish communities, Jewish people who lived in Medina. And we were a small group of people, and I planted a palm tree in an orchard that was owned by a Jewish family that helped the Prophet Muhammad. This was a few months ago. There's a lot of goodwill, and I think there are common enemies for decent people in the region. The Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, the Iranian revolutionary regime, our enemies are also the enemies of other important players in the region. And I think if this war is waged effectively, I think there will be a season of peace. But during this time, we have to be strong and steadfast. But there is hope.
Amen. Thank you so much. Just before I hand it over to the rabbi to close it out, I just want to say from me and personally, and from Ohad, and from hopefully the rabbi, thank you so much to our distinguished panelists who, as you can see, are really on the front lines of fighting hate in all its forms, but specifically hate against our people. And a personal thank you so much for taking time out. And I'll hand it over to the rabbi to close us out.
What a incredible session this was, and how catastrophic that it took an event like this to bring us all together. But as Dr. Small pointed out, this is a silver lining to the current very, very dark cloud. And I think my parting thought is that we have a partnership with Hashem. And that partnership, of course, involves prayer, and involves abiding by the Torah and learning the wisdom of the Torah, as well as teaching that to the world, and taking action wherever we can. I think every one of us needs to ask ourselves, what does Hashem want from me now? What is the best contribution that I can make? Hashem didn't leave the war with Amalek in the desert in his own hands. He asked the Jews to fight the war, and Moshe raised his hands, and there was a partnership between the Jewish people davening and fighting with Hashem. And I think that's the most important thing we all need to remember. We can't say, oh, it's all up to Hashem and not worry about anything. Like the question that was asked about heading into Gaza and being aware of ambushes. But we also can't just say, okay, we're going to figure all this out. We're smart enough to figure all this out. We don't need Hashem. That balance is exactly the oneness of the Jewish people. We are one nation bonded with Hashem, and this is the way that we have to do it. We have to work together, we have to daven together, and we have to pray for Hashem's help together in this time and in all times. Hopefully, like the Rambam tells us, that when the community gathers in prayer, they are always immediately answered. And that's what we are praying for now, that we all pray that way so that we can be answered, we can find hostages, and people can heal, and we can see a better time ahead of us. I'll just conclude with thanking all the panelists as well. It's truly an honor to know the ones that I know so well and continue to learn together and work together. I'm hoping that we'll do another session like this. If anybody is able, please join the chat. That's TUF updates. If anybody wants to know how to participate in a class that we have on a weekly basis that Dr. Finkelstein regularly attends, Dr. Hoenlein may be attending, and Dr. Small sometimes attends, and maybe now a little bit more. We'll bring him back in. We would love to do that. And it's also possible that we will have regular briefings at the end of that class as this situation continues to evolve and unfold. Much love to everyone. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. For anyone who wants to say Tehillim, please say Tehillim now, and let's daven for the safety of everyone. Laila Tov.
Laila Tov. Toda Rabba.